When the knock came on our door that rainy Thursday evening, I didn't know it would unravel my entire family. I remember the smell of wet earth seeping through the hallway window, the low hum of the dishwasher, and my husband, Mark, calling from the kitchen. "Honey, that must be her." I took a breath before opening the door. There she was, Sophie, my brother Thomas's fiancée. Petite, polite, her brown hair damp from the drizzle, clutching a suitcase that looked too small for a woman who'd just moved cities for love. "Hi," she said softly, smiling. "I hope I'm not too early." I didn't know her well yet. Thomas had only introduced her to us 2 months ago, all glowing eyes and laughter. The kind of girl who made everyone in the room feel seen. And when he called last week asking if Sophie could stay with us for a little while they figured out housing near his new job, I didn't hesitate. "Of course," I'd said. "She's family now." At the time, I believed that. Our home wasn't fancy, just a warm 2-story in the suburbs, where the neighbors waved and kids rode bikes past our driveway. The guest room had yellow curtains that danced when the wind came through. Sophie said she loved it, said it felt safe. I didn't realize then how much that word would matter later. Thomas was supposed to be back in town the following week. He worked in real estate, always on a deal, always too busy. Sophie told me they were finalizing wedding plans for spring. She'd left her apartment to save on rent, thinking they'd move into their own place soon. She helped me in the kitchen, folded laundry without asking, and talked about Thomas like he hung the moon. Sometimes, I'd catch her checking her phone, waiting for his name to light up the screen. And when it didn't, her face would soften with a kind of practiced patience I didn't yet understand. Mark noticed it first. "She doesn't talk about her family much," he said one night after Sophie had gone to bed. I shrugged. Maybe she's just shy. But deep down, something about her calmness around Thomas's absence unsettled me. Before all this, Thomas and I were close. He was my little brother, the kind who'd once climbed onto the roof to hang my Christmas lights because Mark was too busy at work. After our parents passed, I felt responsible for him. I was proud of how hard he'd worked to build his career. So when he said he'd finally found the one, I was relieved. He deserved happiness. But over the years, I'd also noticed things about him. I tried to overlook a restlessness, a need to control his own narrative. He'd change stories midway, exaggerate timelines, disappear for a few days, on business. I told myself he was just private, maybe even cautious. That was my mistake. The first week Sophie stayed with us. She was warm, but quiet. The kind of quiet that made you want to ask if she was okay. One morning, while I made coffee, she stood at the window, arms crossed, watching the rain streak down the glass. "Do you ever feel," she asked suddenly, "like you love someone so much, you start to lose pieces of yourself?" I froze. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But love shouldn't make you smaller, Sophie." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That was the first time I wondered what kind of love she was living in. Thomas finally arrived the next Saturday, sharp suit. Easy grin, flowers in hand. He swept Sophie into a hug, kissed her cheek, and thanked us for taking care of his girl. It was charming, a little rehearsed maybe, but typical Thomas. Over dinner, he talked about work, upcoming projects, the future. He didn't ask Sophie much about her week. When she tried to tell him about helping me in the garden, he just nodded and changed the subject. Later that night, after they'd gone for a walk, Mark whispered, "You ever feel like he's performing?" I sighed. "He's just tired." But that night, I couldn't sleep. Something about the way Sophie had looked at him, like she was trying to memorize a stranger, kept replaying in my mind. A few days later, while I was sorting laundry in the guest room, I noticed Sophie's phone buzzing on the nightstand. The name flashing on the screen wasn't Thomas. It was a woman's name, Mara. The message preview read, "Did you tell him yet? He needs to be honest before she finds out." I didn't mean to read it, but those words stuck like a splinter. When Sophie came in moments later, I pretended nothing happened. But she noticed the phone in my hand and froze. For a second, something like fear flickered across her face. Then she smiled tightly, took it, and said, "Thanks." That night, she avoided dinner. I heard muffled voices on the phone from her room, calm, measured, but tense. The next morning, she asked if Thomas could come over again. She said they needed to talk privately. Something in her tone made my stomach twist. When Thomas arrived that afternoon, his smile was gone. They went into the guest room and closed the door. 10 minutes later, I heard raised voices. Sophie's trembling, Thomas's defensive. Mark and I exchanged a glance, but stayed quiet. The argument lasted nearly an hour. Then, suddenly, Silence. When Sophie emerged, her face was pale. She clutched her phone like it was a weapon. Thomas followed, trying to reach for her arm. Sophie, wait. She turned on him, eyes burning. You lied to me, Thomas. You lied about everything. I'll never forget that line. Or the way my brother's face went blank, like a mask slipping. I didn't understand what she meant yet, but I was about to. That evening, Sophie came to me. Her voice was quiet, but her words weren't. Can we talk? She asked. I nodded, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, the same table we'd shared morning coffee at just a week before. I think you deserve to know who your brother really is, she said. And with that sentence, my world began to crack. For a long moment, I didn't speak. The clock above the stove ticked loudly, each second heavier than the last. What do you mean, who he really is? I asked quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. Sophie looked exhausted. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling slightly as she rubbed the edge of her phone. Thomas isn't who you think he is, she said. He's married. I blinked. The word didn't register. Married? I repeated, as if maybe I'd heard her wrong. She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. Legally, to a woman named Mara Jenkins. They have a son. He's 3 years old. The air in the kitchen turned cold. I could hear the rain starting again outside, tapping against the window like a whisper I didn't want to hear. That's impossible, I said finally. Thomas would have told me. He would never. But I stopped. Because suddenly, all those little inconsistencies, the business trips, the weekends he couldn't be reached, the vague stories about helping a friend move, all started to form a pattern. Sophie unlocked her phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a social media profile, Mara Jenkins Thomas. A woman with kind eyes, holding a little boy with curls just like Thomas's. I stared at it, my breath shallow. I didn't believe it at first, Sophie whispered. But when Thomas kept dodging my questions, I started looking. I found her. I even messaged her, and she confirmed everything. Her voice cracked. He told her he loved her, that they were just having a rough patch. He told me she was an ex who couldn't let go. And now, she wiped at her face. Now I don't know who he really is. I didn't sleep that night. Mark sat up with me in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Maybe it's a mistake, I whispered. Maybe there's an explanation. Mark sighed, leaning back. Sweetheart, I've known Thomas for 15 years. He's a good man in many ways, but he's also complicated. If Sophie has proof, maybe it's time you ask him directly. But I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. I kept seeing Thomas as a little boy, mud on his shoes, holding our mother's hand, promising he'd always protect me. How could that same boy grow into a man capable of living 2 lives? The next morning, Sophie left early. She said she was staying at a friend's for a few days, to clear her head. I understood. I told her to call if she needed anything. But as I watched her drive away, I felt the sharp sting of betrayal, not from her, but from the realization that I had unknowingly sheltered my brother's lie. I needed answers. When I called Thomas that evening, he sounded casual. Hey sis, what's up? I forced my voice to stay even. You need to come over. He hesitated. Everything okay? No, I said. It's not. When he arrived, the look on his face told me he already knew what this was about. He sat at the kitchen table, eyes fixed on his hands. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, Is it true? He looked up. What? Don't, I said sharply. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. Is there a woman named Mara Jenkins? His jaw tightened. You've been talking to Sophie, haven't you? Answer me, Thomas. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Yes, Mara and I were married. But it's over. It's been over for a long time. Over? I repeated. She still has your name. You have a child, Thomas. He leaned back, his voice rising. You don't understand. Mara and I were toxic. We tried to make it work, but it wasn't right. She wanted things I couldn't give her: the perfect family, the perfect husband. I couldn't live like that. I stared at him, disbelief flooding my chest. So instead, you built another life? Started dating Sophie while your wife and child still existed? It's not like that, he said, his tone defensive. I was going to tell her. I just needed time to fix things first. I felt something inside me break. Not anger, not sadness, just a hollow ache where trust used to live. Later that night, after he left, I found myself scrolling through Mara's profile again. There were birthday pictures, Thomas holding his son, smiling like a man who had everything. I didn't know if I was more angry at him or at myself for never noticing. I thought about Sophie, her quiet strength, her heartbreak, and about Mara, sitting somewhere with a child who didn't understand why his father wasn't home. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. 2 days later, I reached out to Mara. It took me nearly an hour to write the message, my hands shaking the entire time. Hi, Mara. My name is Claire. I'm Thomas's sister. I think we need to talk woman to woman. She replied within the hour. I was wondering when someone from his family would finally reach out. We met at a small cafe downtown. When she walked in, I recognized her immediately, the same face from the pictures, but tired, older somehow. Claire, she said quietly, extending her hand. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. We sat down. The smell of coffee filled the air, the sound of chatter all around us. But in that moment, it felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of us. Two women, connected by one man's lies. I'm sorry you're caught in this, she said gently. Thomas has always been complicated. I kept hoping he'd change, but when I found out about Sophie, I realized he never would. She took out her phone and showed me messages, documents, even their marriage certificate. I stared at the screen. The evidence, undeniable. He told me he was divorced, I whispered. Mara's eyes softened. He says that to everyone. When I got home that night, Mark was waiting for me. You okay? He asked. I nodded, though tears were already falling. I saw her. She's real, Mark. She's not some ghost from his past. And she has his son, our nephew. Mark wrapped an arm around me. What are you going to do? I didn't know then. All I knew was that I couldn't stay silent anymore. Because silence, I realized, had protected Thomas long enough. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophie's trembling hands, Mara's tired smile, and Thomas's calm, rehearsed face when I confronted him. By morning, I had made up my mind. For years, I'd protected my brother not out of fear, but out of loyalty. I'd covered for his late nights, defended him when family whispered about his commitment issues, even lent him money when his business deals didn't go as planned. But this wasn't a small mistake. This was a web of deception that had trapped innocent people, and now, I was part of it. I couldn't pretend anymore. That afternoon, I called Sophie. She didn't answer, so I texted her. Sophie, it's Claire. Please come by. I have something you should see. She replied an hour later. I'm not sure I can face him again. You won't have to, I promised. When she arrived, she looked drained, like someone who hadn't eaten or slept properly in days. Her usually neat hair was tied back loosely, her eyes red-rimmed, but determined. We sat in the living room, sunlight filtering weakly through the blinds. I handed her my phone, showing her the photos and messages Mara had shared with me. She scrolled in silence, her breath catching when she saw Thomas holding the child. He told me she was obsessed, she whispered, that she wouldn't let him go. I reached for her hand. He lied to all of us, Sophie. Her eyes filled with tears, but there was no rage, just quiet resolve. What's she like? Mara? Stronger than I expected, I said softly. Gentle, too. She's not out for revenge. She just wants the truth to come out, and a fair chance to raise her son without the lies hanging over her. Sophie nodded slowly. Then we help her. We started small. Sophie gathered her messages and call logs, proof of Thomas's relationship with her, while he was still legally married. I compiled everything from Mara. Together, we created a timeline. Clear as day. Mark watched us from the doorway, arms folded, worry etched across his face. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked one evening. He's your brother. I looked up from the papers, and she's his wife. And Sophie's the woman he deceived. I can't keep protecting him, Mark. Not when I know, he sighed, coming over to squeeze my shoulder. Then do it right. Don't let this destroy you in the process. I nodded. I hoped it wouldn't. A week later, I called Thomas again. He sounded cheerful, oblivious. Hey, sis. Haven't heard from you in a while. Thomas, I said quietly. We need to talk. A pause. If this is about Sophie, it's about Mara. Silence. I continued. I've met her. I've seen your son. His voice dropped, low and defensive. You had no right. I had every right. I snapped, my calm cracking for the first time. You dragged me into your lies when you sent Sophie to my home. You made me part of this. Thomas, you think you're protecting anyone? You're destroying them. He cursed under his breath. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. You didn't want to choose, so you lied to both of them. He was breathing heavily now. Do you know what happens if Mara finds out I've been seeing someone else? She'll take my son away. I closed my eyes. Thomas. She already knows. He didn't speak, finally. He muttered, "You shouldn't have gotten involved, Claire. Then maybe you shouldn't have lied," I said, and ended the call. The next day, Mara contacted me again. "He showed up at my apartment," she said, her voice trembling over the phone. "He wanted to talk things out. I told him to leave, but he said you'd turned against him." I felt my throat tighten. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get messy." "It's okay," she said gently. "Messy is better than silent. At least now, everything's out in the open." Her words stayed with me. Messy is better than silent. When the confrontation finally happened, it wasn't planned. Thomas showed up at my house that weekend without warning. I heard his car before I saw him, that same dark gray sedan, idling at the curb like it had so many times before. I met him on the porch. "You shouldn't be here," I said quietly. He gave a small, bitter laugh. "I thought family was supposed to have my back." "I did," I said, "for years. But not when you lie, Thomas. Not when you destroy people's lives and pretend it's love." His face hardened. "You think you're better than me? You think you understand how complicated it was? Mara and I were finished long before Sophie came along." "Then why didn't you end it?" I asked. "Why let both women believe they were your future?" He didn't answer. Instead, his voice dropped to a cold whisper. "You've always judged me, Claire. Ever since we were kids. You loved being the responsible one, the perfect sister. Well, congratulations. You finally get to be the hero." It hurt more than I wanted to admit. "This isn't about being a hero," I said. "It's about doing what's right. And you know what's right, Thomas. Deep down, you do." He looked away, his jaw tight. And for a moment, I saw it, the guilt, the fear, the boy I used to protect. But it vanished as quickly as it came. He turned and walked back to his car. "You're not my family anymore," he said before driving off. I stood there long after the taillights disappeared, the evening air heavy and still. Mark came outside, wrapping his arms around me. "You did what you had to," he whispered. "I know," I said. My voice was calm, but my heart felt hollow. I'd spent my whole life protecting my brother. Now, I was protecting his victims from him. That night, I got a message from Sophie. "I talked to Mara. We're meeting tomorrow to file the complaint together. Thank you for standing by us." I stared at the message, tears blurring my vision. It wasn't relief. I felt it was grief. Grief for the family I'd lost, and the truth I couldn't unsee. But somewhere beneath that ache was a small flicker of peace. For the first time, the lies weren't mine to carry. The day Sophie and Mara filed the complaint, I sat in my car across from the courthouse, watching them walk side by side. Two women bound not by friendship, but by shared betrayal. Sophie wore a navy blazer, her hair pulled back, face steady, despite the tension beneath her calm. Mara carried a small folder in her hands, documents, photos, maybe even the birth certificate of her son. I could see her clutch it like it was both a weapon and a shield. They didn't notice me, and I didn't step out. I wasn't part of their story anymore, at least, not in the way I once was. I was the bridge between two worlds Thomas had built and shattered, and that bridge had already done its job. Still, I couldn't leave until I saw them walk through those doors together. When they did, I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That evening, Thomas called again. His voice was hoarse, tired, nothing like the self-assured man I'd always known. "They filed, didn't they?" he said. "Yes," I replied. He let out a hollow laugh. "So, that's it? You chose them?" "No," I said softly. "I chose what's right." He didn't argue this time. There was just silence, long, heavy silence, filled with the kind of regret that comes too late. "Finally," he whispered. "You think I don't hate myself? You think I don't wake up every day wishing I'd done things differently?" I swallowed hard. "Then start doing things differently, Thomas. Be honest for once. Own what you did." "I can't," he said. "If I tell the truth, I'll lose everything." "You already have," I said quietly. The line went dead. Days turned into weeks. The legal process started to unfold. Custody hearings, statements, documentation. I stayed out of it, though both women kept me updated. Sophie texted sometimes, short updates. "Mara's doing okay. Her lawyer's strong. Thomas hasn't shown up yet." Or, "They called me in to testify next week. I'm nervous." And once, late at night, "Do you ever wonder if he loved any of us?" I stared at that message for a long time before replying. "I think he loved what he got from you both, comfort devotion, admiration. But real love? No. Real love doesn't survive on lies. It was strange how quiet life felt afterward. The storm had passed, but it left behind an eerie calm, the kind that forces you to listen to your own thoughts. Mark noticed it too. One evening, while we were clearing the dinner table, he said, "You've been distant lately." I looked up. "Just processing." He nodded. "You did the right thing. But sometimes, the right thing costs more than we expect." He was right. It did. A few months later, I ran into Mara again, at the park, of all places. She was pushing a stroller, her son giggling, clutching a small stuffed bear. When she saw me, her expression softened. "Claire," she said warmly. He smiled. "You look happier." "I am," she said. "It's not easy, but it's honest now. I can live with that." She hesitated, then added, "Thomas signed over partial custody. He's in therapy, apparently. I don't know if he's changing, but at least he's trying." I nodded slowly. "That's something." She studied me for a moment. "You know, you could have walked away. You didn't owe any of us this." I sighed, looking out at her son. "Maybe not. But I couldn't keep pretending. Not after seeing what it was doing to all of you, to him, even." She smiled faintly. "You're a good sister, Claire, even if he doesn't know it." I didn't answer, because maybe being a good sister wasn't about standing beside him anymore. Maybe it was about standing where the truth needed me most. Later that week, I got an unexpected email. The sender, Thomas Hale. The subject line read, "Thank you." My heart skipped. I clicked it open. "Claire, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. You were right, I've been living in lies for so long. I forgot what honesty even felt like. I've hurt people I loved, people who trusted me. I can't undo that. But I can start owning it. I've started seeing a counselor. It's not easy. Facing myself never is. But I wanted you to know. I'm trying. For my son, if not for myself. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to hear it from me. Not the gossip, not the reports. Just me. Thank you for not letting me destroy everyone around me. Even if it cost us." "Thomas." I stared at the screen, tears blurring the words. For a long time, I'd hated what he'd done. But now, I could finally let go of that hate, because it had already done its job. It had burned through the lies, leaving only the truth behind. A few days later, I printed the email and tucked it into a box in my closet. The same box where I kept old family photos, letters from my parents, and childhood drawings Thomas and I made together. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the beginning of peace. As I closed the lid, I whispered softly, to no one in particular. We were kids once. We believed love could fix anything. Then I smiled faintly. Turns out, sometimes love means walking away. Outside, the sun was setting, the kind that paints everything gold. Like the world itself is trying to make peace with the day. I stepped onto the porch, breathing in the quiet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to break. It already had. And somehow, that was okay. 2 years have passed since that storm, but sometimes I still catch the echo of it in the way my phone goes silent when Thomas's name appears, or in the way my heart tenses before I answer. We speak now, occasionally. Short calls, careful words. There's no warmth yet, but there's no poison either. Just distance, healing at its own pace. Thomas moved to a small town outside Denver. He found a job in construction hands-on work, something that keeps him grounded. Mara lets him see their son on weekends now, under a steady arrangement. It's progress. Sophie, on the other hand, has rebuilt her life completely. She finished her degree, got a teaching position at a local school, and even sent me a photo once standing beside her class of first graders, smiling like the light finally found its way back to her. I keep that photo on my fridge. One afternoon last spring, I found myself driving through the old neighborhood, the one where Thomas and I grew up. The streets hadn't changed much, except maybe the trees looked taller, wiser somehow. I parked outside the house where we were raised. Our parents sold it years ago, but I sat there anyway, watching the curtains move in the breeze. That house had seen it all. The scraped knees, the late-night talks, the childish promises to never lie to each other. I guess neither of us knew how heavy those promises would become. As I sat there, I thought about how easily love and loyalty can blind us, how often we protect the people we love, even from the truth that could save them. That was me, for most of my life. I wanted to believe Thomas was good, That family meant forgiveness, without conditions. But sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't covering someone's sin, it's refusing to let them live in it. A few months later, I got a call. It was Thomas. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey." He paused. "Mara invited me to Liam's birthday next week. He's turning 5. "That's good," I said softly. "You'll be there?" "I will. I wanted to ask if you'd come too." She said it's fine. I froze. The idea of all of us, me, him, Mara, their son in one place, felt surreal. But then again, maybe that's what healing looks like. Standing in the same space without the weight of everything that broke you. So I went. It was held at a small community park, full of balloons, laughter, the smell of barbecue and sunscreen. I spotted Mara first, helping her son blow bubbles while a cluster of kids ran around shouting. Then I saw Thomas. He was crouched by the cake table, lighting candles, his face softer somehow, like the past had finally stopped chasing him. When our eyes met, there was a flicker of guilt. Yes, but also something new. Gratitude. He walked over, hands in his pockets. "You came," he said. "I did." We stood in silence for a few seconds before I added, "He's beautiful, Thomas. Liam looks just like you." Thomas smiled faintly. "Yeah, I'm lucky she lets me be around him. I don't deserve it. No one ever does," I said. "But you're showing up. That's what matters now." He nodded. "I'm trying, Claire. I really am." And for the first time, I believed him. Later, as the kids tore into cupcakes and the sun dipped low, I sat on a picnic bench, watching them all. Mara chatting with another parent, Thomas laughing as Liam smeared frosting on his cheek, the air filled with that pure, fleeting sound of joy. It hit me then how small the world becomes when truth finally settles. How peaceful life feels when there's nothing left to hide. Mark joined me, handing me a lemonade. "Feels like closure, doesn't it?" he said gently. "More like a new chapter," I replied. He smiled. "You did good, Claire. You didn't just save them, you saved yourself too." That night, when I got home, I sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The sky was a quiet sea of stars. I thought about all the versions of myself that had lived through that story. The naive sister who believed love meant silence. The furious one who broke ties to protect truth. The weary one who learned forgiveness isn't about erasing pain, but accepting it. If you'd asked me back then whether I'd ever forgive Thomas, I would have said no. But forgiveness came quietly, not as a grand gesture, but as a small peace that settled in one day when I realized I no longer flinched at his name. There's a quote I once read: "Some truths break you, so they can rebuild you stronger." That's what happened to us. Thomas lost everything to his lies. But through that loss, he found something more important: humility, accountability, a real start. And me? I found strength in honesty. The kind that doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to punish it, just stands firm. If I've learned anything, it's this. Blood doesn't make you family. Truth does. Love does. The courage to face what's ugly, so something beautiful can grow again. That's what makes a family. A few weeks ago, I got another email from Thomas. Subject: dinner? "Hey sis, there's a little diner near the lake. Thought maybe we could catch up sometime, just the two of us. No past, no guilt. Just coffee and a fresh start. If you say no, I'll understand. Love, T." I smiled at that one. Haven't replied yet, but I will. Soon. Because I think we're both ready for that kind of quiet conversation. The thing about betrayal is, it never really leaves you. It lingers, like a scar. But scars aren't ugly. They're proof of survival. Proof that we healed, that we grew, that we kept going. And when I think back to that moment, Sophie, standing in my doorway, shaking with heartbreak, Mara, crying in my living room, Thomas's voice trembling over the phone, I realize it all led here. To truth, to peace, to the kind of love that doesn't hide. When I tell this story now, I don't tell it with anger anymore. I tell it with understanding. Because sometimes, family doesn't fall apart because we stop loving each other. It falls apart because we confuse love with protection. I thought keeping quiet would keep the peace. I thought pretending not to see would make things easier. But silence only feeds the lies and the truth. The truth always finds a way out, even if it has to burn through everything first. If you're listening to this, maybe you've been there too, standing between what's right and what's comfortable. Maybe you've loved someone who hurt others, and you didn't know what to do. I hope my story reminds you that love and honesty aren't enemies. They walk together. Sometimes, doing the right thing will make you the villain for a while. People will call you disloyal, cruel, heartless, but one day, when the dust settles, they'll see it was your courage that saved them, even if it hurt. So, if you ever find yourself torn between loyalty and truth, remember, loyalty built on lies will crumble, but truth, even when it shatters, always rebuilds something stronger. Would you have done what I did? Would you have chosen truth over family peace? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know your heart. And if my story touched you tonight, don't forget to subscribe and share. Somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that it's okay to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. Until next time, this is Claire, signing off, with love, from one soul, trying to live honestly, in a world that often forgets how.